The day before our wedding, my fiancé agreed to a fake marriage with his first love just to help her avoid a family-arranged blind date. They didn't stop at just taking wedding photos, they even planned an elaborate ceremony. When I saw their photos together, I calmly broke up with him. He, however, accused me of being petty. It was just a favor, nothing actually happened. Why are you so selfish? If your ex needed help, I would have done the same for you. Later, I turned around and married his biggest rival. He dropped to his knees, crying and asking, "This is just a fake marriage, right?" Smiling, I kissed my groom and flashed our marriage certificate. Sorry, it's the real deal. Chapter 1. Today was supposed to be the day Ethan and I took our wedding photos, but he disappeared yet again. As the photographer's anxious gaze pressed on me, I frantically called Ethan countless times, but no one picked up. This kind of situation had been going on for nearly a month. It was supposed to be our wedding, yet I was the only one worrying, busy with the preparations. Ethan always claimed he was too busy, so busy that I barely saw him. He wouldn't even tell me what was so important that it took precedence over his own wedding. Anxiously, I kept reaching out to friends, hoping one of them might know where he was, or that he might finally return my call. But instead, I saw a photo of him on a friend's social media page. The sight shocked me so deeply, I felt as if my heart had stopped. In the photo, Ethan was embracing a woman in a white wedding dress, both smiling sweetly. As I scrolled down, there were more photos of them in various poses holding hands, gazing into each other's eyes, even playful, candid moments. It felt like an invisible hand was squeezing my heart, my mind buzzing as the photos blazed on my screen. The woman in the photos wasn't a stranger to me, she was Ethan's childhood friend, Lynn. They had always been very close. Whenever Lynn needed something, Ethan was the first person she would call, and I had even added her to his contacts on WeChat myself. But never had I imagined that the two people he called like siblings would appear so intimately in a set of wedding photos together. Lynn had even captioned the photos with a suggestive "Ethane, my Ethan." As I sat there in shock, Ethan suddenly sent me a voice message. "Sonny, something urgent came up at work, and I can't get away. Today was the day for our wedding photos, right? You go ahead and start without me, I'll join you as soon as I'm free. Love you." If you listened closely at the end of the message, you could even hear Lynn calling his name in the background. I couldn't fathom how Ethan could be taking wedding photos with another woman while still saying "love you" to me as if nothing had happened. When people reach a certain level of anger, they become eerily calm. I quickly deduced their location from Lynn's photos. It was Silver Peak. So, I drove there immediately, and sure enough, in the distance, I spotted Ethan and Lynn posing for the photographer, dressed in formal wedding attire. They embraced with such ease, like they were truly a couple. With each step I took closer, I could see Ethan's smile becoming clearer. Suddenly, Ethan let go of Lynn's shoulder, his gaze landing on me, his face turning ashen. "Sonny, why are you here? Aren't you supposed to be taking our wedding photos?" Chapter 2. I looked closely at the lavish wedding dress Lynn was wearing and couldn't help but remark, "No wonder you didn't have time for our photos. Seems you were busy elsewhere." Ethan immediately caught the sarcasm in my tone, frowning slightly. "Sonny, Lynn and I are just pretending to get married. Do you have to be so dramatic?" He stepped closer and took my hand, his tone softening. "Her family has been pushing her, and she didn't want to go on a blind date, so she asked me for help. As her brother, I couldn't say no to such a small favor when she wanted to take wedding photos. We're just going to take a few pictures and hold a mock wedding. It'll be over soon." I could hardly believe my ears. I shook his hand off sharply. "Did you say a wedding? You're actually planning to hold a wedding with her?" Ethan looked taken aback by my reaction, stumbling back a few steps, his face turning pale. Lynn quickly stepped in, grabbing his arm and glaring at me. "Why did you push Ethan?" I narrowed my eyes, responding icily. "What does it matter to you?" "Enough." Ethan placed himself in front of Lynn, his brow furrowed tightly. "Sonny, Lynn is my good friend and practically family. I've always seen her as a sister, so mind your words. Besides, I'm just helping her out, nothing happened. Do you have to blow things out of proportion? My anger flared uncontrollably. We're about to get married, and today was supposed to be our day to take wedding photos together, yet here you are taking photos with another woman. And now you're telling me that holding a mock wedding isn't crossing a ethane? Ethan's face showed no remorse as he replied, defensively. What's the big deal? If your ex or first love needed help in a special situation, I'd support you too. As soon as he finished, Lynn stepped forward with a knowing smile. Ethan might not have told you, but I'm not just his childhood friend, I'm also his first love. If I really wanted to get back together with him, you wouldn't stand a chance. So don't worry. If something were meant to happen between us, it would have happened a long time ago. This is just a fake marriage, stop making such a fuss. I looked at Ethan, disbelief and pain filling my heart. Ethan, if this is what you believe in, then there's nothing left for us to continue. Ethan jumped up, pointing his finger at me angrily. Are you threatening me with marriage now? Sonny, how can you be so petty? I didn't respond. With quiet composure, I took off my engagement ring and threw it over the cliff, right in front of him. Chapter 3. Once, at the lowest point of my life, Ethan was the one who helped me through it. Back then, I was studying abroad when my grandfather suddenly had a heart attack. I couldn't make it back in time to say goodbye. Without Ethan, my pen pal, who continuously comforted and encouraged me with warm words, I honestly don't know if I would have ever managed to escape that endless cycle of regret and despair. When I returned to the country, Ethan recognized me, and we naturally became friends and eventually, a couple. During our 3 years together, though he often lost his temper and repeatedly tested my boundaries, I forgave him, thinking he hadn't crossed any serious ethanes. But never did I imagine he'd so brazenly use the excuse of brotherhood to spend time with his ex, even going so far as to organize a wedding for her while hurling insults at me. I can no longer understand how Ethan could be so different from the gentle boy who once won me over with heartfelt words. Sonny, maybe that's enough for tonight, Max said, pulling my drink away with a sigh. I never thought Ethan would go this far. I always had a feeling he and that, what's her name, Lynn, something just felt off about them being brothers. I didn't expect they'd actually have this sort of connection. We're done, so don't bring him up again, I said sharply, frowning. Max swallowed a mouthful of his drink, then couldn't help but ask. But since the engagement was announced, the stock prices for the Tang and Su families have been soaring. How do you plan to explain the cancellation to upper management? I shot him a cold look. When did you start valuing profit over principles? I get it, but still. He sighed deeply. Just then, a commotion broke out not far from us. I squinted, spotting a tall, slender guy arguing with another man. Sonny, isn't that Harry? That jerk, Ethan's worst enemy. Max pointed. Sure enough, it was Harry, and their dispute was escalating. It looked like a fight might break out any second. Harry gripped the other man's sleeve, yelling, "You think you're in the right, taking upskirt photos? Hand over your phone. Where did this psycho come from? Get lost." The man struggled to escape, but Harry held on tight. Deny it all you want. I already called the police, you can wait for them here. The mention of the police visibly rattled the man. Mind your own business. You're going to regret this, he hissed, yanking his arm and shoving Harry to the ground before pulling out a butterfly knife. Max grabbed his wrist before he could swing it. I tried to help but narrowly avoided getting slashed myself. Harry, scrambling to his feet, kicked the knife from the man's hand. Good job! Hold on to him, don't let him get away, I cheered from the sidelines. Just then, the sound of sirens approached. We escorted the man to the police station, where it was confirmed he was a repeat offender. By the time we finished our statements, it was past midnight. Oh no! Harry exclaimed, checking his phone with a panicked look. What's wrong? I asked. It's late, I need to get home to feed my cat. Sunny, thank you for today. I'll visit soon to properly show my gratitude," he said, rushing to the curb to hail a cab. But at this hour, there were none in sight, so I called him back. "It's too late for cabs. Come with us." Harry hesitated, clearly uneasy. Given his history with Ethan, he was naturally wary about appearing too friendly with me. "I've broken up with Ethan," I said calmly. His eyes widened with shock. "Hey, are you guys coming or not?" Max shouted from the car. After a brief pause, Harry joined us in the car. Chapter 4. The three of us sat in silence, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Harry kept his eyes on his phone, scrolling aimlessly to ease the awkwardness. Suddenly, he glanced up at me, then quickly looked down as if shocked by something on his screen, his brow furrowing deeply. Catching my puzzled expression, he turned his phone over, mumbling, "Nothing. It's nothing really." After dropping Harry off, I returned home to see several messages from Max popping up as soon as I unlocked my phone. "Ethan is really trying to provoke you, isn't he? Sunny, you were right. Compared to principles, profits mean nothing. I can't believe Ethan actually did this." It was then I realized why Harry had looked so disturbed. Ethan had posted pictures of him and Lynn in wedding attire on social media with a caption, taking a jab at me. Why are some people so insecure? Just a few photos for a friend, what's the big deal? Whether he did this out of spite or some other reason, I wasn't interested in analyzing it further. But it did remind me that it was time to block both him and Lynn from my contacts. The next morning, I was jolted awake by a rapid knock on my door. Outside stood Harry, grinning, holding a bag of groceries. "Didn't I promise I'd thank you properly? I keep my promises, don't I?" Without waiting for an invitation, he made his way into the kitchen, rolled up his sleeves, and started prepping like it was second nature. Watching him work, I couldn't help but notice how kind-hearted he was, a complete contrast to Ethan's depiction. When the meal was ready, and after some coaxing from me, he finally sat down, setting the last bowl of soup on the table. "Go ahead, try my cooking," he said eagerly. I took a bite of tofu. It was so tender it practically melted. Looking up, I found Harry watching me anxiously, chin propped on his hands, eyes filled with concern. Suddenly, I understood what he was getting at. "Are you worried I'll stop eating properly just because I went through a breakup?" He didn't even try to hide it, nodding earnestly. I was about to tease him when his next words took me completely by surprise. "Sunny, why don't we get married?" His face flushed instantly, and he closed his eyes, seemingly gathering his courage before continuing. "My family's on par with the Tang family. Marrying me could benefit your family's business just as much. Besides, Ethan treated you terribly. Why waste any more time on him when you could move on with someone who's truly right for you?" Opening his eyes again, he looked at me with a new resolve. "Sunny, I'm serious. I hope you'll consider it." For some reason, under his warm, determined gaze, I found myself nodding. He seemed almost afraid I might change my mind, immediately suggesting we go to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get our marriage certificate. But as adults, we have to consider many factors. After thinking it over, I realized getting married now would bring me considerable advantages, both personally and professionally. So, I agreed to meet Harry downstairs at the office, and we headed straight to the bureau. Just as we were about to leave, I heard the unmistakable, grating voice of Ethan calling out from behind us. "Sunny!" He approached, looking visibly upset. "You actually blocked me?" In the next instant, his gaze landed on Harry's hand holding my arm, and his anger intensified. "Harry, how dare you seduce my fiancé?" I quickly positioned myself in front of Harry, meeting Ethan's furious glare with a cold stare of my own. "Ethan, we're over." Ethan looked stunned, his eyes turning red. "Sunny, are you trying to spite me? Are you teaming up with him to put on this act and deceive me? You're overthinking it. I intend to marry him." Chapter 5. After I said that, Ethan's face fell, his expression darkening into a cold sneer. You really need to stop throwing these tantrums and understand when enough is enough. Last time you tried to threaten me by calling off the engagement, and now you're saying you're going to marry someone else? Sonny, you're too old to be playing such ridiculous games. His words dripped with disdain, his tone sharp with mockery. For years, Ethan had relied on my tolerance and love, arrogantly assuming I'd never leave him. No matter how hurtful his actions were, I had always quietly endured them. Now, he interpreted my choice to be with someone else as a petty attempt to provoke him, a childish move designed solely to spite him. Tell me, Ethan, who's really being childish here? How dare you show up just to mock others? Harry stepped forward, meeting Ethan's gaze head-on with the same calm but intense demeanor he'd shown at the bar that night. Your values never cease to amaze me. You're engaged, yet you took wedding photos with your ex, shamelessly posted them on social media, and then have the audacity to call others petty. Aren't you worried about how foolish you make yourself look, parading around like that every day? Ethan sneered, retorting. Don't try to play the saint here, Harry. Just admit it, you know you're no match for me, so you're resorting to these underhanded tricks to try and steal my woman. I'd advise you to give it up. Sunny won't leave me. Her feelings for me aren't something a few cheap words from you can change. You're not worthy of Sunny. Harry narrowed his eyes, his expression growing more serious. Ethan, you've been exploiting Sunny's patience, testing her limits time and again just to boost your own fragile ego, without a single thought for her feelings. Someone as selfish and untrustworthy as you doesn't deserve love. You're right about one thing. A few words from me aren't enough to shake the foundation of a 3-year relationship. But I believe that, now that Sunny has seen your true colors and chosen to end things with you, she won't betray her principles by coming back. Harry, Ethan's unyielding rival, had silenced him with just a few pointed remarks, leaving him speechless and visibly fuming. I hadn't expected Harry to understand my history with Ethan so deeply, or to stand up so fiercely on my behalf. Let's go! Harry cast Ethan one last look of disdain, then took my hand and led me away without a backward glance. His hand was warm and steady, and as he held mine, I felt a quiet thrill, a glimmer of anticipation for the future we might share together. Chapter 6. Harry didn't hesitate for a moment, practically pulling me along to the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau. He looked up with a faint smile, his eyes filled with anticipation. Last chance to confirm. Don't tell me you're having second thoughts now. Without a word, I squeezed his hand tightly and walked forward with purpose. But when it came time to take the photo for our marriage certificate, Harry suddenly seemed nervous. The photographer patiently instructed. Groom, give us a smile, just relax. Standing beside me, Harry fidgeted, his fingers twining together as his breaths came slightly faster. Nervous? I asked softly. He nodded, looking almost like a child caught doing something wrong. His gaze flickered as he whispered, his voice barely audible. I'm afraid this might be a whim for you. That someday you'll regret it and resent me for holding you to this. His voice was so soft it was nearly lost in the air. I gently took his hands in mine, separating his clenched fingers and enveloping them warmly. With conviction, I told him, You're wonderful, so wonderful that I want to marry you. This isn't just polite talk, it's exactly how I feel right now. Harry's eyes reddened slightly, his expression mingling joy with a hint of vulnerability, and an unbidden smile rose to his lips. With the click of the camera, his smile was forever captured on our marriage certificate. For the wedding, Harry threw himself into every detail, personally overseeing each arrangement even though everything had been planned well in advance. This dedication suited my skills perfectly, no one knew the wedding details better than I did. Every night after work, we would go over each part of the ceremony in detail. To my surprise, Harry and I shared such similar tastes that we often picked the exact same options without discussing them beforehand. During this busy period, I barely checked my phone, but one day, while clearing notifications, I was stunned to see dozens of messages from Ethan. They were all multimedia messages. Each one held a photo of him and Lynn traveling, their faces bright with smiles, their interactions as close as ever. Yet, none of it stirred the slightest feeling within me. Looking back, it even seemed laughable. After I'd blocked Ethan on WeChat, he had resorted to sending these photos through text to provoke me. I flipped through a few images indifferently. Despite the beautiful landscapes in the background, their travel photos now seemed hollow and meaningless to me. As I put my phone away, I simply added Ethan's number to my blocked contacts list as well. Chapter 7. Before the wedding officially began, I planned to take Harry to visit my dear grandmother. Ever since my grandfather passed away, my grandmother's health had deteriorated, and she had been living in the hospital. The thing that weighed most on her mind was undoubtedly my marriage. She knew all about my previous engagement and wedding preparations with Ethan, so I needed to explain the sudden change to her in advance. But to my surprise, when Harry and I entered my grandmother's hospital room, we unexpectedly ran into Ethan. He was leaning by the bed, talking softly with my grandmother. When he saw me, his eyes lit up. "Sonny, you're here!" He greeted me warmly, using the same affectionate tone he used when we were dating, as if all the turmoil of the past days had never happened. Even when he saw Harry behind me, Ethan didn't show any signs of discomfort. He just paused briefly before naturally walking over to Harry, opening his arms. "Harry, long time no see. How have you been?" Before Harry could respond, Ethan turned to my grandmother, excitedly introducing. "Grandma, this is Harry, my best friend from university. I've mentioned your health to him, and he's been concerned. See, he came to visit you himself. Harry is so thoughtful and considerate. If you know any good girls, remember to introduce them to him." Ethan chatted warmly with my grandmother, barely giving us a chance to speak. Not wanting to argue with him in front of my grandmother, I frowned and pulled him aside. "Let's talk outside." Though reluctant, Ethan followed me out of the room, still assuring my grandmother he'd be right back. "What are you doing?" I asked. "What am I doing? I should be asking you that." Outside the room, Ethan rubbed his wrist, looking aggrieved. "Why did you block my number? And now you're bringing him to see Grandma. Sonny, even if you want to vent your anger, there should be a limit. What are you trying to achieve? Aren't you afraid I'll really get angry? I'm not acting. Ethan, this is the last time I'll say it, we've broken up. Stop looking for me. And I'm going to marry Harry soon. Visiting Grandma together is perfectly reasonable, and it's none of your business. Are you out of your mind?" Ethan finally dropped his pretense, no longer playing the victim, and angrily questioned me. "Is this all because of the wedding photos with Lynn? Just because of that, you're deliberately finding my biggest rival to get back at me? You're wrong. Harry is a playboy, not as good as me. Sonny, you probably don't know, but Harry had a relationship with Lynn long ago. He seduced her, played with her feelings, and then abandoned her. Everyone in our circle looks down on him for that. Don't be fooled by his willingness to play this new game with you. Once he's tired of it, he'll dump you just like he did with Lynn." Chapter 8. Ethan's gaze was like a spotlight, fixed on my face, as if trying to catch any hint of disappointment towards Harry. "So, what exactly are you trying to achieve by saying all this?" I asked, my tone indifferent. "Let's set aside the truth for a moment. Even if Harry is as bad as you say, does that change the hurt you've caused me? Ethan, what surprises me is that even now, you think I broke up with you out of impulse or to find someone new. Do you really not understand, or are you deliberately avoiding why I gave up on our relationship?" I paused briefly before continuing. "As for the past, I don't know everything, but from what I know of Harry, he's a reasonable and principled person. Even if Lynn was his ex, so what? At least he knows how to keep a distance from the past and won't do anything inappropriate. Before you criticize others, shouldn't you reflect on yourself first?" Ethan's breathing became rapid, and he grabbed my sleeve, his voice trembling. "Why do you believe him but not me? We've been together for 3 years, Sonny. You never treated me like this before." I pried his fingers off my sleeve one by one, my tone cold. Yes, we were together for 3 years, but that doesn't mean you can involve my grandmother and Harry in our issues. So, from now on, whatever you have to say it to me directly. Don't drag them into it. Remember, we've broken up." Ethan stood there in shock, blinking rapidly, shaking his head and muttering no repeatedly. But everything was already decided. When I returned to the room, Harry was chatting animatedly with my grandmother, as if they had known each other forever. My grandmother saw me and immediately called me over, holding my hand in one of hers and Harry's in the other, her eyes shining with joy. "Harry has told me everything. I understand you went through a lot with Ethan. But I never expected you two to end up together. It's wonderful, it makes me so happy." I looked at Harry puzzled. "You know my grandmother?" My grandmother had mentioned that after my grandfather passed away, she was in a daze for a long time. With my parents busy with work and me studying abroad, she often felt lonely. During that time, she met a kind young man in the park. After learning about her situation, he patiently comforted her and often brought little things to cheer her up, helping her gradually overcome her grief. I never expected that person to be Harry. As time passed, my grandmother slowly recovered from my grandfather's death, but Harry had gone abroad. Now, both of them were overjoyed to see each other again. My grandmother chatted with us until dusk, reluctantly letting us leave. On the way home, Harry was unusually quiet, not his usual lively self. At first, I thought he was just tired, but seeing his tightly pressed lips, I couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong? Did something happen?" Harry hesitated for a moment before finally speaking. "Just now, did Ethan say a lot of bad things about me?" I nodded silently. Chapter 9. After returning to China, I learned that Ethan had an archenemy. But it was said that they used to be as close as brothers before they became enemies. At that time, Harry was not in hiking, and all my impressions of him came from Ethan's mouth, naturally not in a good light. Later, Harry returned to hiking. Although our families had business dealings, under Ethan's influence, my interactions with Harry were limited to polite nods. It wasn't until recently that I truly got to know Harry. Only then did I realize that he was passionate and upright, completely different from the scheming villain Ethan had described. "It's not like that." Harry urgently defended himself. "I knew he would badmouth me behind my back. You know, I once considered Ethan my best friend, sharing everything with him, until I discovered he approached me out of jealousy. When I was in the campus radio station, he forced his childhood friend into the station and asked me to take care of her. Out of consideration for my relationship with Ethan, I did take care of her. But Ethan turned the tables, spreading rumors that I stole his girlfriend and fabricated a story that we were dating. I couldn't accept such slander, so I immediately distanced myself from them. But the rumors turned into me being fickle and playing with feelings. Ethan set me up, isolating me in our circle. I couldn't take it anymore and eventually chose to go abroad." Harry sighed, his voice low. Looking back now, I was really too weak back then. Hearing Harry's story, I was stunned. Who could have imagined that the sunny and cheerful Harry had gone through such hardships? I couldn't even fathom how he endured it all alone. But it all sounded like something Ethan would do. I asked, "Was the girl who falsely accused you Lynn?" "Yes, the same one he took wedding photos with." Harry paused, wrinkling his nose. "I just thought, since we're married, I should be completely honest with you. But whether you believe it or not is up to you." "I believe you." I didn't hesitate, gently patting Harry's head. "I'm just sorry you had to suffer." Chapter 10. After the confrontation at the hospital, Ethan really disappeared from my life. And my wedding with Harry was approaching day by day. We had already explained everything to our parents. Both families gathered for a lively meal. Harry's parents looked at me with satisfaction, and my parents were equally pleased. The dinner was filled with joy, and even when it ended, the elders were reluctant to part. On the wedding day, Max showed up at dawn, dressed handsomely as the best man, grinning at Harry. "Congratulations, Harry. Let's make a deal. Give me a big red envelope, and I'll put in extra effort to find the bride's shoes and get her home early." I laughed and kicked him lightly. "Whose friend are you anyway?" Just then, there was a commotion outside. When I went to check, I saw the last person I wanted to see, Ethan. He looked particularly haggard, with dark circles under his eyes and stubble, yet he still forced a smile, shouting something. The security guards blocked him tightly. "Sir, without an invitation, you can't enter. Are you blind? This is my wedding. I've been preparing for it for half a year. Are you blind? This is my wedding. I've been preparing for it for half a year." Ethan argued with the guards, and when he saw me, he shouted excitedly, "Sonny, tell these blind fools that I'm the main character today. I've decided to cut ties with Lynn. The person I want to marry is you. I came here today to marry you." I was no longer surprised by Ethan's outrageous behavior. Although expected, I didn't want any disruptions on my wedding day. I calmly looked at Ethan and instructed the security guards. "This person is emotionally unstable, don't let him in." As soon as I said that, Ethan's momentum deflated and he pleaded, "Sonny, forgive me. This time, it's really my fault. I want to be with you." I ignored him and gave the security guards a look. Harry heard the commotion and rushed over, his tie still undone. Even in this state, Ethan stared at Harry. Suddenly, he knelt on the ground, crying, and asked me, "You won't forgive me just because of him, right? What does he have that I don't? Why are you marrying him? You're just fake married, right?" Harry didn't care about his tears, pointing at Ethan and sternly saying, "Ethan, if you dare ruin my wedding, you'll regret it." Seeing Harry's angry face, I found it particularly adorable. I couldn't help but kiss his cheek and then smiled at Ethan. "Sorry, I'm serious." Ethan cried, his face covered in tears. "Why? Sonny, you can't marry him. You love me the most." I didn't respond to his words or show any mercy, instructing the security guards to escort him out. Ethan's sudden visit was just a minor episode, and we didn't take it too seriously. After all, to Harry and me, the wedding itself was the most important thing. As the wedding officially began, watching Harry walk towards me with a bouquet, my eyes welled up. This was the purest form of marriage in my heart: loyalty, trust, and deep love. When we exchanged rings, I mouthed to him, "Thank you." Harry understood and gave me a loving smile. Chapter 11. After the wedding, Harry and I embarked on our honeymoon, traveling to various places and enjoying our sweet time together. During this time, Ethan and Lynn's relationship quickly heated up, and they even publicly announced their engagement. But their high-profile relationship didn't last long. It soon fell apart due to Lynn's infidelity, which Ethan caught firsthand. These bits of gossip reached me thanks to Max's chatty nature. When we returned from our honeymoon, Harry was busy unpacking, and I went to open the windows for some fresh air. From a distance, I noticed a figure curled up at our doorstep. When I approached, I realized it was Ethan. As soon as he saw me, he pouted pitifully, grabbing my sleeve and babbling, "Sonny, you're finally back. You don't know, while you were away, everyone bullied and laughed at me. I only have you left. Please come back to me." I gently pulled my hand away, my voice calm and firm. "Ethan, it's time to wake up. I'm married now and I love my husband deeply. So what? You can still get divorced. Sonny, even if you don't care about our 3 years together, don't you remember who was there for you during your toughest times abroad? I need you now. How can you just leave me?" Ethan's words brought back memories of the dark days after my grandfather's death. It was true that his handwritten letters gave me the courage to face life again. But the Ethan before me was a far cry from the one in my memories. "Nonsense." Harry appeared beside me, angrily rebuking Ethan. "Ethan, no wonder you were so eager to push me out back then. It wasn't just jealousy, you wanted to replace me and pretend to be the one writing those letters, didn't you?" Harry's words struck like lightning, clearing the fog in my mind and piecing everything together. Harry stepped in front of me, continuing. Sonny, remember I told you about my close friendship with Ethan? It was during that time he learned about my letters to you. But I never imagined he would set his sights on you so early. I couldn't believe he would use my name to morally bind you. The intricate yet logical truth left me stunned. Facing Harry, my emotions grew more complex. Ethan desperately argued. No, Sonny, he's lying. Listen to me. I looked at Ethan, the last bit of warmth in my heart for him fading away. Ethan, how long do you plan to keep this up? Let's end this. I don't want my memories of you to be filled with lies. Ethan's protests weakened, eventually reduced to sobbing apologies. Back home, Harry recounted the story of our correspondence in detail. After being forced abroad, his email was hacked shortly after. Despite this, Harry continued to care for me from afar. When he returned and found me with Ethan, he chose to silently watch over me. As for why he hesitated to reveal his identity after our marriage, his answer was filled with tenderness and guilt. Sonny, I always felt guilty for leaving without a word. I was also afraid that bringing up the past would remind you of those painful memories. When someone cherishes you deeply, they will protect you from unnecessary harm. Harry gently asked. Sonny, now that you know everything, what are you thinking? I'm grateful. I took Harry's hand and kissed it. Grateful for fate, for allowing us to meet again and rediscover each other. Fortunately, it's not too late. Cherishing the present, we have endless possibilities ahead.